I'm Craig McCoy. I'm the chair of London HR Connection, which is a role I've had for the last 8 years or so. I'm also a senior director of HR with about 35 years experience, and I'm currently the interim HR director at Four Seasons Healthcare. So a few words about London HR Connection, a long-established professional networking group, and originally established in the 1980s within the framework of the CIPD. I chair an independent board with 9 professionals. During the pandemic, as for many businesses, we had to adapt and go to webinar-only format. I'm pleased to say that we're now back into a mixture of live events and webinars. I'll say a bit at the end about our next upcoming live event. But both formats have their advantages, so we'll continue to run both formats as we go forward. And then just to mention that we are a not-for-profit organisation, and our model is based on commercial sponsorship in order to cover our running costs. So without any further ado, let's get started with our main topic for today, which is how do we create human connections across our businesses? And I know that this is a massive challenge for all HR teams, no matter what size of organisation, as we shift towards a much more remote and hybrid based organisation approach. And how do we keep people involved, feel valued and appreciated in this ever more challenging and complex way of working? And we'll be looking at 4 key moments in the employee life cycle and sharing how we can make an impact. We've got a great expert panel here today, and you'll hear from them the sort of challenges and solutions that they've experienced in relation to this topic as we go forward. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves. So Becca, please, if I can start with you, and you're the Internal Comms and Engagement Manager at Dermalogica.
So hi, Dermalogica is a skincare brand, the #1 professional skincare brand worldwide. I have a slightly different background. I started Dermalogica as a skin therapist. I spent 10 years in their education team. The latter part of that, I moved out of an educator role and into more experience-based roles, people management. And then I swiftly moved into HR last year. So HR arena is still relatively new to me, but people and people management is sort of really where I've spent most of my career. And yeah, sort of just taken on internal comms elements and really delved into my passion of onboarding and connecting with people.
Very good. Thank you for that, Becca. And next in the frame, Benjamin Kandabi, you're a customer success coach at Culture Amp.
Yes, thank you very much, Craig. So yeah, I'm Ben Kandabi, or Benjamin. I'm quite flexible on that. And I am a customer success coach at Culture Amp, and we are an employee experience platform. So I specifically look after our UK enterprise customers, but I've come from a recruitment background, then worked in kind of SaaS startup environment during kind of a large period of growth, and now find myself at kind of Culture Amp. But I've been very fortunate to work with a variety of customers and get lots of interesting insight into everything from talent attraction, talent onboarding, all the way through to kind of levers, and advising companies on kind of alumni networks and creating kind of ongoing champions. So really looking forward to sharing today.
Very good. Thank you very much for that. So next in the frame, Alan Wilson, you're the People Operations Manager at Tarabut Gateway.
Yes, thank you, Craig. Grateful to be here. So yeah, I've been at TG now for about 7 or 8 months. We're an open banking scale-up based in the MENA region. Well, we have a number of employees based in the UK, of which I am one of them, based up in Scotland. So my background is mainly in people operations and process improvement. I've worked across multiple different types of organisations: banking, defence companies, software, more latterly retail and online retail, and then obviously been at TG for a period of time. And my role is really simple. I think it's really about I suppose all the infrastructure, people operations is the intersection of all the good stuff that's happening in an organisation, in my own opinion. And for me, you know, a lot of the work I do is really directed towards the systems, the processes, the infrastructure, how to maximise that. What does that all add up to? Fundamentally, it's about the employee experience. And so I'm a big advocate of humanising the workplace. You know, I really have a real passion for finding ways of working that help us to rediscover the importance of being a human being and not a human doer. And I think that is critical and something that I'll touch on a little bit more as we go through the conversation today.
Very good. Thank you, Alan. And last but not least, introduce Hannah Haffenrichter, and you are the Global People Experience Manager at Enboarder.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my background has always been really in HR, in quite large organisations actually. And then I came over to Enboarder as a customer success manager to sort of support customers improve their employee experiences. And then recently moved back to, I suppose, what my experience is in, which is people. So I'm part of the people team at Enboarder, and really helping our organisation to drive great employee experiences at key moments in the employee life cycle.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And yeah, great panel lined up for this afternoon. So to get things going and to get some participation from everybody who's dialed in, we're going to start with a few icebreakers in terms of some polls, just to understand what's currently happening out there. So Denise, if you could have the first poll, please, that would be great. Here we go. So this is a very straightforward question, hopefully. Are you currently working remotely, hybrid, or 100% in the office? So please do vote now.
Few more seconds. Okay.
Okay.
Right, we'll end the poll now.
Hybrid, 73%. Not surprised, but still about 7% are saying still 100% in the office. Yeah, hybrid working is definitely here to stay, isn't it? Okay, so let's move on to the second one then, please, Denise. So how connected do you currently feel to your team and the broader business? And please choose one of the four: very well connected, not very well, or no connection at all. Please vote now. A few more seconds. Okay, should we have a look at the results? Okay, well, almost 50% feel well connected, 16% very well connected, but 35% not very well connected, which is a bit of a worry, isn't it? But, I'm sure we will touch on that in this webinar. So thank you. And can we have the third and final poll, please? Okay, so is the company doing enough to make you feel connected to them? Single choice, yes, no, trying but failing, not trying. Please answer the question now. Okay, just a few more seconds. Okay, should we have a look at the answer? Yes, okay, so the majority of you feel the company is doing enough, which is good to hear. But 7% are not even trying, which is a bit disappointing. So yeah, I think it's useful to have that sort of benchmark as to how you're all feeling about this whole issue to get us started. So thank you for taking part in the polls. So now let's move on to our panelists. So we've got a number of topic areas to talk about in relation to this. And the first one is about sort of pre-boarding and onboarding stage. And I'm going to start off with a question for Hannah, because obviously this is a big topic for you, Hannah. But, in your opinion, is onboarding the biggest opportunity to drive employee experience, or does it start even before that with pre-boarding? What's your view on that?
Yeah, we do obviously do a lot with onboarding at Enboarder, but for me, actually, when I think about employee experience, I think about it more as kind of an ongoing journey. So it's sort of actually even before onboarding, before pre-boarding, and actually, you know, when a candidate even engages with your organization. So maybe when they are applying for a job and then they're going through the interview process, I think it really starts then. But absolutely think that it's before onboarding, and where we focus a lot is in pre-boarding. I like to think, you know, taking on a new job is a life-changing decision for a lot of people. So when you go through that pre-boarding, once you've signed your contract and you're going into pre-boarding, it's the opportunity to confirm to that candidate why they're joining, get them excited about the organization, get them excited about the culture. So absolutely at Enboarder, I think that that's a key point in the employee experience. I think it's the opportunity to send that bite-sized information. You might want to bring in a buddy at that point, but you are really, you're orientating them to the culture at that point as well, and getting them excited. So yeah, I think it does start well before onboarding itself.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that one then, so what are some ways you can actually improve the experience of onboarding in your experience?
There are lots of ways, I think, to improve it. The first thing I would say, I think with onboarding, we put a lot of emphasis on the manager, the direct manager, to kind of own that process. But what we often lack is actually managers don't always know what they're doing or what they're meant to do. I can see Becca's smiling because I know that that's something that they've had at Dermalogica.
I'll ask you next.
but you have new managers, right? We've got it here as we're growing as an organisation. You get new managers that actually don't know how to onboard. So the first thing I would say for improving the onboarding experience is enabling those managers for their role. So how do you coach them into delivering a really awesome onboarding experience? And, you know, in the connection piece, can you nudge them with that human connection, encourage them to make contact prior to day one? And obviously here we use our own platform to do that and support, but it's really about encouraging them and coaching managers through that process. The other point that I would raise that I think works really well is bringing other stakeholders in. So don't just have it as the managers, but think about with onboarding is, are there other stakeholders that we can bring into this, like a buddy program? Can we give new hires, you know, other points of contact that they can go to and feel connected to throughout pre-boarding and onboarding as well? They'd probably be my two biggest pieces, would be enabling managers and then looking at bringing in other stakeholders too.
That makes a lot of sense. It certainly resonates with me working in the care sector, where the time lag to get people actually started when they've gone through DBS and referencing and so on is so long, you risk losing a lot of people. Becca, I'm going to ask you the same question. What experience has worked well for you at Dermalogica in terms of this stage of getting people on board?
I mean, I mirror everything Hannah says. I think, as she said, you know, the manager piece is really big. And I think for us, that was something that we had to tap into, is really making sure our managers felt like that process wasn't another platform or another task for them to do. That's something that crops up a lot for us. So it was really looking at how we can support them. So pulling on my own experience as a line manager, and when you don't maybe recruit all the time, what are those things that really picked up or you maybe forget to do, or where do you find the form? So for us, everything sits in Enboarder. It's completely revolutionized our onboarding experience from the manager, but also the new hire. For me, I'd say, you know, I've worked a lot on completely overhauling our onboarding experience, and I would say also listen to your people. Reach out to those managers that are maybe recruiting often or not a lot, or your new starters. You know, what was missing? What did they enjoy the most? You know, what made them feel connected? Where maybe did they want to feel something and they didn't maybe have it, or they'd like to have seen and they didn't get that information and they felt like it was sort of missing in that journey. So I think that for me was a really big piece, just going back to the people who'd experienced it, using it listening to that and then implementing it. And then for us, that actually meant that we broke down the different experiences. So we want everybody to get the same feeling, that culture absorption, but for different departments that meant different things, especially our retail team. They have very high turnover. The managers recruit all the time. They maybe don't need as much notification. So for us, it was that really going back to our people and listening.
Yeah, and very much tailored to the functions and needs of particular
Yes.
job groups. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Ben, I'm going to turn to you, and the question I've got is around thinking about large-scale businesses operating across international borders, different time zones, different cultures. How important do you think it is to get this experience right?
I think it's massively important. I think to echo some of the point that Hannah and Becca have mentioned so far, that first interaction is an opportunity for people to kind of validate actually their decision to join a business. And we talk about we talk about those kind of probation periods, right? And they're an opportunity for people to make that decision on, have I joined the right place and the place that resonates with myself and kind of my values and the ways of working that are going to be vital for myself. And when you are an organization that is scaling or growing or large in size, it can be easy sometimes to miss certain opportunities to make sure that every interaction that someone has with your organization is a positive one. So if you think about things like the referencing stage prior to someone joining, does that kind of organization or does that referencing process, the people running that or the organization running that, does that resonate and kind of with the values of your own organization? Again, that is an impression that you're making with new joiners, even before someone from your organization has potentially had a chance to speak with them. So those first impressions are important. And when we think about the kind of hiring at scale and things like time zones, thinking about how you maximize those opportunities where everyone or a large majority of your teams are potentially online at the same time if you're a remote organization. How do we maximize those opportunities where people can connect with their teams, can share notes about blockers or opportunities with their customers or within their workload? So really thinking about what's that time that we get to spend together, and what can we learn from that, and how can we utilize every moment that we have with folks in a positive way.
Sounds really good. I mean, just picking up, there's a couple of things I want to pick up in the chat in a minute or two. So if you can just have a look at those. One of the, just as an aside, as I say, that you mentioned probation, and probation to me is a very outdated term and concept and has quite a lot of negative connotations. I think it's one of my bugbears, actually. I think we should probably just change the word or scrap it completely, but there you go, that's just me. Okay, so I'm going to turn to Alan, and I'm going to ask you, Alan, about your particular experience at Tarabut Gateway and fast-growing fintech. How have you gone about establishing new connections for people joining?
I think one of the key things we all want to try and replicate in these more remote environments is the magic that we had or have when we get around other people. Some of the challenges that we face, some of the questions we're asking just now are very much questions we're actually solving at the moment. So I certainly not claiming to have all the answers, but I think, we're a fully remote business. We're working across multiple jurisdictions, with a large presence in MENA and in the UK. Our business model is very much expanding across locations and expanding the customer base rapidly, which means that if you can imagine trying to establish connection in such a fast-paced, moving environment where, in actual fact, a lot of the people who are interacting from the regions have never worked together before as well. And of course, throw into the mix that we, of course, all remote. That just brings a lot of challenges that maybe in the past you wouldn't have had to have solved. And I suppose from our perspective, we're asking questions around how can we create, an environment of safety where people can come, they can express themselves fully, and they can also share their wisdom and share their knowledge very much from the day that they join. And I think that, to answer some of the things that we've been focusing on is really getting everybody to speak the same language. And that has really meant looking at the values. What are our company values? What impact does that have? And I think we touched on what does onboarding mean? Well, that comes from all the way from the talent attraction piece, and it runs all the way through onboarding and beyond. So it's really about getting everybody speaking the same language, pointing in the same direction. For us, it's been about getting the right touch points in place as well. When people join, that they know that they can be supported. And of course, people communicate in different ways. They have different languages for how they like to do that. So, we have all hands, culture club, remote socials, Slack channels, regular check-ins from the manager, which Onboarder is really effective at helping us do. And also like from the people team as well, really playing that role as the conduit and just joining the dots and making people feel really welcome, helping us overcome some of those challenges that I mentioned about being across jurisdictions, being in different regions and different time zones. And I think something that's probably worthwhile calling out here is fostering all of this from the top. We have a CEO who is extremely open. I would say probably a heart-centered leader is the way I would describe it. And so he also really promotes the type of dialogue that I'm talking about to really help us connect across these different jurisdictions and cultures. For me, more practically, I think some great points have been touched on already. I would say listening and tracking, and also then feeding back the actions that you're taking as you go through. People come on board, you are always continuously improving your experience for them. And what I've found to be really powerful is that we listen during that onboarding journey. We're tracking it through like the ENPS scores. Again, Onboarder's great for that. But more importantly, going back and telling people what you've done with what they've told you. You said we did is the way that I would describe it. And it's been super powerful for keeping people engaged. We've seen a big uptick in the scoring between, we do our scoring at week 1, we do scoring at month 1. And we're seeing consistently between them. And even that consistency is lasting out all the way to month 3 as well. So it's complex at the moment, fintech's a really hot market, real battle for talent as well. And of course, all the other issues that I've flung into the mix there. But I think it's all about bringing in the human element into what you're doing, regardless whether it's a process or whether it's conversations, really focusing on the human element, really listening to what people have got to say and really thinking about how can we show people we're taking action with what they're telling us.
Yeah, really interesting, Alan. You started to touch on some of the points, I think, in answer to the question that Sunil has posted, which is about, what data and feedback you collect from new hires to see how engaged they're actually feeling. It sounds like, Alan, you've got a lot of touch points there, a lot of data that you're collecting.
Yeah, we do have, and we break it down. So, I think some of this comes as standard with Onboarder. So there are different lenses to look at. It can be around the manager relationship, the colleague relationship. And of course, you're honing in on all those things to try and understand where there might be pain points for a new joiner. But then the broader score of the ENPS, which obviously we look at, we use that as a real indicator. And of course, what we saw in the beginning with Onboarder was that we were getting that drop off. People were having a great pre-boarding experience that was reflected in their week 1 scoring. But of course, once they were embedded in the business, we're a scale up. So as you can imagine, we're still building a lot of the ways of working. We're still building the right solutions to connect us all together. So we were seeing that drop off, but through these interventions that I've been talking about, through the listening, through having the channels, the various channels to allow new joiners and employees in general to channel their ideas, their feedback, and then by actually taking action against it and demonstrating that, that has been super powerful for us. Our scores have been, extremely high, and from what I understand from Onboarder are out up there with the top, customers that they have. So I think it's just about listening to people. What would you need if you were in a new joiner circumstance? It's actually quite simple. And I think maybe somewhere along the line in the world of HR, we sort of lost some of that, and I think it's about rediscovering that now.
Very good, thank you. Lots of data, lots of touch points, which I'm sure will help. So I'm going to move us on to the second topic, which is all about one-on-one relationships and mentoring, which I think is a really important part of making people feel welcome and oriented towards the organisation. My first question is for Becca. So Becca, this thing about creating a culture of connection, it's not all just about HR, is it? It's not all HR's responsibility. So what do you do to empower your managers to become the champions of this?
Yes, this is something that is slightly newer to us, something we've been working on. We've actually got a fantastic learning and development manager. So I've been working really closely with her on how we sort of upskill people, I guess. We've sort of got a two-pronged approach alongside buddies, because I think also, as Hannah said, it's not all on the manager. So where are your other people in the business that can support that? So buddies is a big portion for us. Not all managers choose someone, and then we find that they're missing elements within that onboarding and that culture connection. But from us, we have looked at our manager piece, and we've done two sides. We have actually created a leadership program. So what we've tried to do from that is we've actually chosen 20 of our top talent in the business for our first cohort, and each person within that, or each delegate within that program, has actually been given a mentor that is one of our senior leadership, including our GM. So what that's allowing us to do is really connect our leadership team with the top talent in the business, but also allow everybody to get that sort of mentor aspect and sort of feeding that support down, I guess, and really bringing that sort of culture of connection together through that piece. The other aspect we've sort of done with that is our manager induction. So when somebody new starts with us, if they're either moving up into a people manager role or they're coming in brand new as a people manager, we found there's a lot of sort of missing elements there. We want you to be great people managers, but we're maybe not giving you the information that you need to. So we feel that information right at the beginning of really covering our policies, our procedures, but more so in that, really thinking about how as a brand and within our culture, we offer you that feedback, that coaching. So it's really starting from we're supporting those managers to really allow that connection right from the get-go with their team. So for us, it's also making sure, as you were saying, with that sort of one-on-one annual review type aspect, that there's no sort of hidden surprises when you then get to that review as such, depending on where they happen. For us, that's sort of really once a year. We're trying to get more one-on-ones through the year, so that then you're having those conversations and it's a build-up of development for you and that connection with your manager, and then your manager's connection with the leadership team. So we're really trying to create all those dots throughout.
Very good, yeah. And we could have a whole separate webinar on appraisal and annual performance review.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, Ben, I'm going to turn to you. And what in your experience has been the value of really focusing on these one-to-one relationships and mentoring program? What has the value been?
Like, honestly, I think one-on-ones can almost be your most valuable touch point with employees, because one-on-ones allow, especially with your kind of mentor or manager, they allow that manager and that individual to check in regularly. And if you have enabled your managers to kind of have those quality conversations with their employees, it helps with things like those end of year appraisals, because those conversations have been ongoing rather than kind of getting to a point at the end of the year where you just have that one conversation about, okay, how have you done this year? The manager goes into that session with hopefully some really useful feedback, and they've been able to grow and learn as a manager for that person, because they've been able to have quality conversations that aren't potentially just talking about the employee's kind of work and their kind of day-to-day role, but also talking about ongoing career development opportunities for that individual, really celebrating potential wins that person has had during that week, during that quarter, whatever that individual might have been working on, and also thinking about working together on blockers that person might be finding. We've also kind of worked on and found here at Culture Amp, we have regular one-on-ones kind of each week with our managers. And in that kind of weekly check-in I have with my manager, I'm able to talk about everything outside of that. So thinking about what is going on as far as social connection with the rest of my colleagues. Am I getting an opportunity to kind of have those more informal coffee chats that you may not have if you are kind of working remotely or more hybrid? So really kind of leaning into those conversations so that my manager knows what's going on with me. And when we think about kind of bringing our kind of most authentic self to the work to your workplace, being able to talk about things like your mental health and how those external things going on outside of work might be affecting your kind of experience in the workplace as well. So I think one-on-ones can be a really great opportunity to highlight lots of things going on, not only for kind of the individual, but for the manager to grow as a leader for that individual too. And when we think about kind of the buddy systems and how they can kind of assist with that, so we have a buddy system here, and buddy systems I found are a great way of really allowing kind of new joiners to create those social connections immediately. As someone kind of coming into an organization, you potentially don't know anyone there. So having a buddy, someone that you can ask questions about, okay, where do I go for these specific resources? How do I get access to this particular, how do I get involved with this ERG, etc. So they can be that first kind of impacting individual to connect that new joiner with lots of things that are happening in the organization. And quite often I've enjoyed seeing new joiners become buddies because they're able to kind of share their experience as a new joiner as well with other new joiners. So really kind of creating those kind of webs of connection across the organization and across various different teams as well.
Very good. Thank you for that. And one of the participants has just asked a question about, just for context, to understand the sort of size and scale of the organizations you represent. So Alan, I'm going to turn to you next. So just say a little bit about Tarabut Gateway in terms of size and scale, and then I'll ask you the next question.
Yeah, absolutely. So TG, we're almost 100 people now, so spread across multiple jurisdictions. So in the UK, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE as well.
Cool, very good. So my question to you is, anything in particular that you do to really spark those all-important connections with people and foster one-to-one relationships and mentoring?
Mm-hmm. I think so. One of the big projects we're looking at right now is really around performance and engagement. And I suppose from my perspective, whilst we don't have the framework in place yet, I can let you and give you some insights into some of the things that we've been thinking about. I think firstly, we've been using Enboarder right at the very beginning. As people enter the organisation, we've scaled up fairly quickly. So, we're managing to get access to a large proportion of the headcount already who've come through the process. And we've been able to really set the standards around, encouraging employees and managers to do those check-ins, to set goals, and also encouraging that feedback culture, which I think is absolutely critical to create connection. I think on top of that, I think there's a lot more that we can do around, really supporting managers, giving them that guidance and support to really give clarity and support the employees in the right way. I think for me, I think I mentioned in one of the questions I was looking over was really around like feedback and, should it be anonymous and all of that sort of stuff. And it really sparked some thoughts for me as well around what does this all mean for creating connection, about how do we give feedback, and how do we connect around performance. And I think for me, it's all about weaving all of this into the flow of work. What I mean by that is that, when it comes to some of this stuff, it really feels like it's all above and beyond the day job. And I think where we need to get to is a place where we have the right tools in place to allow us to run them through the actual ways of working that the teams already have established. And I think that's where we can really build the maturity in, the ways of working when it comes to feedback, connection, performance. And I think also as well, like what I certainly would like to encourage is, is leaving some of the old performance management habits in the past, moving towards a place where people have more candor, more trust, because ultimately you create connections through trust. So I think like creating a feedback culture is really critical. I think also having honesty and openness in all of the dialogue, making things human-centric again, and really finding the ways to use your technology in order to extract that out, to really be able to pull and get the insights and data you need about who is performing well and who, are the connections where they need to be through various types of analysis. So we're in the process of just beginning to look at all of this, and these are some of the thoughts that I captured as part of that.
Really, very good, very, very interesting. And I'm going to move on to the final sort of question in this section, Hannah, is for you. Obviously, with Enboarder, you work with many different clients in very different contexts. What are some of the ways that you've found can really help create connections with people working remotely?
Yeah, good. I think we're getting better at this remote working now, because it's been around for a while. But I think there's a few. I definitely wouldn't. I know we're a technology company and employee experience, but I definitely would never suggest to customers and even internally to use technology to replace that human connection. I think really what we use it for and recommend is always to use it to spark human connection. So encourage it, maybe use it for nudges to that coaching piece for managers. But ways to create connection in remote environments, I think the difference is really needing to be more deliberate and more structured with time in these remote environments. I know some people disagree with that, but I think it's about maybe setting aside time. It's not just, the big HR projects like mentoring or buddy programs. It can just be encouraging employees and managers to set aside time just for those conversations, the non-work related conversations and the work related conversations, because we just don't have those natural meetings happen anymore when we're in this remote world. So sometimes it's not always the big people projects, but it's also around coaching managers, just to set aside that time. And if technology can help to drive those nudges, then great.
Very good, thank you. And I'm going to move us on to the next section now, which is all about feedback and performance reviews. I'm going to stay with you first of all, Hannah. So performance reviews, appraisal, it can be really stressful for employees, can't it? The dreaded appraisal, the once a year kind of the stress point that everyone fears. So how can we create more of a culture of ongoing 360 feedback in your experience?
Yeah, it can be really stressful, and I even know for myself it's been really stressful as well in the past. So I think we're still looking actually at Enboarder internally. What does our performance management program look like? But really the way that I like to think about it, and the people team like to think about it, is there shouldn't be anything new that's coming in that performance conversation that you have, if it's once a year or twice a year. It should just be a confirmation of all those conversations that you've already had with your manager. And really, when we think about a performance management program, how do we equip managers to have those conversations throughout the year? How do we equip them to have a meaningful one-to-one where we're giving constructive feedback, positive, constructive feedback as well? And so I think that's the way to look at it, is really around, can you weave in that coaching into maybe leadership development training and other areas where you're helping managers. But I think it's really key that psychological safety. It is about building trust and kind of knowing what's coming. So enabling managers to be able to have those ongoing conversations, I think is the way that I've seen it done best. And that's what we're really hoping to implement and foster at Enboarder too.
Very good. No, thank you. And on a similar theme, Alan, I'm going to turn to you next. So how do you go about collecting anonymous feedback at Tarabut Gateway?
So at the moment, it's all done at a departmental level. The people team are not hugely embedded in it yet, because as I've touched on, this is something that we're about to embark on. From a personal perspective, I think that anonymous feedback is part of the old regime. I think the future of, if you look at remote environments and how do you cultivate trust, it's already quite difficult because you're not one-to-one with people. You're not getting that human connection that, you know, in the same space. So I think anonymous feedback has its benefits, it has its merits, but I think it probably needs to be consigned to the past for me. And I think this is part of some of the design work that we are doing and thinking about, is how do we design solutions that are open, that are transparent? How do we, you know, in the long term, support our people, coach both managers and employees into being able to express that radical candor, is probably the best way to put it. And that's a journey that we need to go on. It's not going to happen overnight, given where we're currently at. But I do feel like it's absolutely critical to be able to foster that openness and honesty, I think, so that people can know that any feedback that they are getting, and that's two-way from both manager and manager to employee and vice versa, so that they know that it's coming from the right place. And sometimes when you take the person out of it and allow, you know, feedback to be submitted anonymously, I do feel like it can be quite damaging just from past experiences. And that's something that we'll probably try to steer away from as best we possibly can. As I've already touched on, I think the importance of sort of building our solutions, and I think Hannah's referred to this as well, as how do we overlay the whatever tooling it takes, or whatever framework we put in place, how do we overlay that and basically allow it to flow through the ways of working that are already established. So this is a question that I think we've solved it quite yet, but just from a personal perspective, I do feel like, you know, the best way to cultivate connection, the best way to cultivate trust is for there to be openness. And I think, as I touched on previously, we have lots of forums for that to happen. One-to-one forums, lots of check-ins. We have all hands, we have a culture club where we specifically focus on the things that are working, the things that are not working, remote socials, you know, really just trying to find and touching all the dimensions of who a person is and giving them the opportunity to express themselves and feedback what's working for them, what's working, you know, as for our organisation, but equally what's not working as well. So there's a few different dimensions to look at.
Good. Yeah, no, I do agree. Anonymous feedback's hard to do anything with it, and people don't necessarily feel accountable when giving it. So it's a bit of a problematic area. Becca, any insights from you on this topic in terms of do you collect anonymous feedback? How do you go about that?
Yeah, so we do a once a year global survey across all of our corporate offices. So to also answer the question from earlier, we're a headcount of about 360 across the UK and Ireland, but we have global offices or corporate offices in the UK, Canada and Australia, and then distributor markets across the rest of the world. So there's quite a lot of us underneath the Dermalogica umbrella. So globally, once a year, we do a temperature check survey in which we use Culture Amp, so Ben's aspect there, and that for us is awesome. But I think just to link back to what Alan said, that you know, you can take feedback from wherever, but actually I think it's one of the points you said right at the beginning, Alan, of like, what are you actually doing with it, and where have you gone back to those teams to say, okay, this is what you told us and this is what we've done with it and implemented and changed, or, you know, we've really found that as a bit of a feedback piece for us is, you know, we feel like we need to throughout the year keep coming back to, okay, so this is what you told us. It's taken us 6 months to really, you know, look at that and, you know, now have to implement something, or, you know, this has taken us longer. It's not an overnight change, to keep coming back to it and keep reminding people throughout the year, so it doesn't feel like, well, once a year we ask for your feedback and then we do nothing with it. So we've really tried to use that as a keep coming back from our side as well. And I think, as I said earlier, you know, that whole culture piece we're trying to create of coaching and feedback is just part of our culture. As I said, I came from an education team, so that feedback and coaching comes part of the parcel. You know, there's someone standing at the back of the room watching you. That doesn't really happen anywhere else, you know, within your day-to-day roles. But I think for us, it's those sort of two pieces of, you know, those one-to-ones throughout the year, as Hannah said, so it isn't a surprise at the end of the year when you get to your review and someone tells you you're not doing okay, or actually that your manager doesn't feel confident to tell you that you're not doing okay. So you just sort of continue going, and then maybe 10 years down the line or another point you get a new manager and all of a sudden they tell you you're not performing and you're like, but hang on, no one's told me that for this long. So I think you know, that whole piece of really supporting those managers to feel like you can have those conversations to develop someone and it not feel like you're being criticised within what you're doing.
Yeah, that's really important, isn't it? And Ben, any thoughts from you in terms of what have you seen working well as sort of best practice in requesting feedback, delivering feedback?
I think, like, to echo some of the point that kind of Hannah and Becca raised there, I think it's really important that organizations have really clear guidance on actually what good feedback looks like for employees. And also it's a great way to kind of set expectations for both that ad hoc feedback that you might get throughout the year and that feedback that might be related specifically to that performance review, because we all know that not everyone is good at giving kind of both giving feedback and receiving feedback as well. So in the lead up to kind of embarking on those kind of first performance reviews, especially for new joiners, I think it's a really great way to set those expectations so that they know, and it's important where those important resources are, that they know that there's guidance around how to share that feedback and what they can expect from that. We often see that people want those performance reviews on those performance processes to be as kind of fair and equitable as possible. So this often means that, and just ensuring that if they know what they are being assessed against, they're much more likely to trust that process. And if they know how those decisions are made around promotions, pay rises, etc., they're more likely to kind of really lean into that process with enthusiasm and kind of think about actually what has been my journey to kind of and what are those kind of main objectives that I have delivered that can help me kind of have this conversation with my manager or with leaders across organizations. When we think about those performance processes, I think often kind of involving those self-assessments. So how do I think I've done? And really also bringing in peer feedback is a great way of delivering performance reviews, because not only does it give that individual an opportunity to see how their employees are kind of reviewing and how they're contributing or feeling how they're contributing to their teams and their roles, but also how they're impacting across the organization as well. So we know that it's not just our work that can help us get those promotions and get those kind of career development and career moves, but also the way that we work with our colleagues, the way that we kind of bring ourselves into the workplace has an impact on those kind of decisions that organizations often make.
It does indeed, I agree. And finally on this topic, Hannah, I was going to ask you about your experience of mentoring and mentorship programs. Any particular aspects of them that you've seen that particularly impressed you across your clients and more generally?
Yeah, I was actually just going to pick up on Ben's point around that peer feedback. I really like that, actually getting peer feedback. So that's now in my mind for performance management. Mentorship, again, for context, the question in the chat, we are 160 people globally, UK, the US and Australia, but massively growing. So I'm learning a lot around from the panel here and I getting ideas as well. So mentorship, it's something that we're looking at internally, but yes, I have seen it done well at previous organizations and also with clients. I think where I've been most impressed is really where the process is, the program's been really well designed and thought out, and there are clear objectives to the program versus just kind of telling someone they're now a mentor. So having those really good objectives set out, and really it goes back to the same manager enablement piece that we spoke about with onboarding, but actually enabling mentors. People, might not have been mentors before. It doesn't come naturally to everybody. So thinking about, if you're designing a program, setting out some structure for the mentor's role, what is expected of them in this role, even guidance to what does it look like when you meet with your mentee, and maybe what should that conversation look like, and then in a similar way for mentees, clear guidance on how to prepare for sessions. And I think we've spoken quite a bit about feedback. So to Alan's point as well, with these programs, can we ask for feedback on them so we can continue to make them better as well? So I definitely think it's the enablement, clear expectations of these programs if you're implementing them, and then continuous feedback so that you can continue to improve.
Very good, thank you. I'm going to stay with you, Hannah, for the final section of this webinar, which is about resignation and exit interviews. So something that we all face. Hannah, what do you think why is it important to gain feedback through the exit interview? Don't people already know? I think people are leaving. It's all about money, isn't it?
I think, the exit interview is important. I think in one of the points is it shouldn't just be a tick box of like, oh, why are they leaving? Let's just get some data on it. Yeah, it's going to be about money, and let's just tick that box and that be the end of it. I think you can gather some really interesting feedback in terms of what you can do better. It's not always negative feedback. So I think there's a lot of value in the exit interview itself, but more broadly than that, I think there's a lot of value in the exit process. And that exit interview maybe being the last touch point that you have with an employee who's leaving, which goes to the point at the beginning of the webinar around this employee experience as a continuous journey. So it starts maybe with the candidate experience, and it doesn't just end when somebody hands in their resignation. So I think it's a really important moment in the employee life cycle for the employer brand. It might be somebody that wants to come back. So there's real power in the alumni network. They might refer a friend to work for the organization, or they might be leaving a review for you on Glassdoor. So I think that not only is the actual data you can gather from the exit interview important, but I think that exit process and making sure that, it's still your employer brand, that you take that seriously, right to the point of somebody leaving. It's not just a tick box, let's get their IT and then out the door, move on. So yes, I think it's really important.
Good. No, I certainly agree with that. I'm going to ask a similar question. So, Alan, what in your experience can you do to make the sort of resignation, the exit process, a positive experience for both for the person leaving, but also for the rest of the organisation?
Yeah, I think Hannah's touched on some of the really pertinent points. I think first and foremost, get the communication right, so get the messaging right, both to the person who's leaving, but also to the broader team. I think handling the comms and the messaging in the right way can really support the leaver and their colleagues in having a positive experience, and also avoiding all that uncertainty that can sometimes come for all parties involved. And I think that's really critical, particularly if there's leaders leaving the business. People often think, what does this mean for me? So I think getting that messaging right, and it's especially important right now when there's upheaval happening, which of course people leaving does, especially in smaller organizations like ourselves. You do feel the impact of someone moving on, maybe more so than what you do in a much larger organization. But I do think if you get that right, there's it can help, just navigate through any retention issues that you might have with anybody else who might be feeling, a bit unsettled. So especially now it's so competitive in the market for talent. So I think getting the comms right. I also feel like celebrate people's successes. It's absolutely vital, especially for regrettable leavers, people we would rather have retained. I do feel, if we can remind them and be grateful for their contributions, and that means educating and empowering our managers to do nice things for them before they leave, and also involve their colleagues and the broader team in that as well. Obviously, by giving people a great experience and making it positive before they leave, and by expressing that gratitude, which is one of the most powerful things you can do, it just helps with scoring, so you see your, any scoring you get, maybe on Glassdoor, for example. And of course, it also leaves the door open for that person to come back. They've had a really great experience. You treated them with the type of respect that they deserve, because they're a human being, so why wouldn't you? And then, of course, the final thing I would say is obviously tracking the experience. Track what's going on during that journey from a leaver's perspective, but also from a manager's perspective. what insights can you gather from there to bring into your continuous improvement loop? You know, if you don't know, if you're just waiting for somebody to tell you anecdotally what works and what doesn't, you're never going to solve all the problems. What you want to do is get to the root causes. And that means tracking and having all the right information at hand. So you're really nurturing that feedback culture, and you're understanding perhaps some of the deeper reasons why someone's leaving as well. And it means that you can do something about it.
That's very true. And you don't want to be like, as Steve has put in the chat, you don't want to be falling dominoes when someone leaves. We certainly don't want that. As we're approaching the hour, I'll just ask Ben, Becca, anything additional to add on this topic, and any extra insights that you've seen work well?
Yeah, I think just one thing to call out, as an employee, I think sometimes that exit interview can be a real opportunity for that person to share out loud and often regain their voice that they may not have felt they had, and that may be a reason why they're leaving. So organizations really leading with empathy during that kind of exit process can be super valuable for kind of just the individual, and kind of giving that person their kind of power back almost, if they're in that position where they felt that was something that was lost. But as in, like, for organizations, touching on that boomerang, or those boomerang employees that potentially could come back and are regrettable leavers, just ensuring that you're listening at that stage, and ensuring that you're picking up and understanding that feedback that is being shared. And when those moments happen, when did that person become disengaged, so that we can look to avoid that, and really look to address that if it's something that we're seeing kind of come up as a pattern amongst kind of lots of leavers in your org.
Yeah, very good. Becca, anything to add to that?
I think so. I think that was some awesome answers from the other three.
Okay, excellent. We are approaching the hour, so just a final opportunity for any panelists who'd like to make any closing comments. Let me start with Alan. Anything from you?
I'd probably just like to say, I suppose the key takeaways, if I could communicate anything to you, it would be, you know, whatever you're doing, make it about the human being that sits behind the employee. I think ditching some of the outdated and very narrow views of treating people as simply resources, and embracing all of what makes them human, is fundamental to how you design great experiences, and of course create connection as well. I think fostering safety from the top, you know, is another powerful way of creating connection across the employee life cycle, prioritizing well-being, and, you know, really, I suppose, promoting that psychological safety, which has been touched on throughout. I think we are all very intuitive beings, and if you can create environments where people can let their guard down, I think what will happen is you'll create the culture of connection that you're looking for. And of course, with that connection comes success. It's very, very simple, but it's all about, you know, what the future is really about. Despite all the technology we have, it's really about a human future, and I'm very passionate about impressing that onto as many people as I possibly can.
Very good. Thank you. Ben, any final comments from you?
I think Alan articulated that so well there. So yeah, pretty much echoing what Alan said there.
Cool. Very good. Becca?
Yeah, I agree. I think some key pieces of, and again, sort of pieces that we've sort of said, and also Alan said as well, you know, like listen to the feedback, go back, share it, but also don't be afraid to evolve and try new things.
Very good. Very good. And Hannah, finally, from Enboarder's point of view? You're on mute, Hannah.
Someone was going to do that in this webinar, weren't they? It had to be me. I think, no, that's covered. I think in terms of technology's great, but the human connection, the empathy, that's really important as well. And the other thing I would just add in is transparency as well with these things that you're doing. It's okay to say, you know, yeah, we didn't get it right first time. We're going to make it better with the performance side of things as well, transparency too. So that's the only thing I would add.
Cool, thank you very much. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists. So Becca, Ben, Alan, Hannah, thank you for a very stimulating conversation. I've enjoyed it. Hopefully everybody online has enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure you'd be happy to pick up afterwards with people who would like to contact